Hey guys, this is Megan with the Safety Coaches. And we wanted to bring you a true safety story, kind of in podcast style, where you can listen to what happened and then think about how this affects your own practice. This is an international safety story that centers around MRI safety. If you don't work in imaging services, though, please still watch it because most likely at some point you will interact with an MRI department. Even if you don't, the safety standards and communication behind this really apply to all disciplines. So let's get started with this safety story. This happened in early 2023, so earlier this year, in the country of Brazil. The patient brought her son in with her. So, Mr. Matthias de Novaes, I apologize because my Portuguese is non existent. He was a lawyer in Brazil at about 40 years old. So, his mother's going in for an MRI scan at a diagnostic center. And I couldn't really find out why he was going to go into the suite with her, but it could be a variety of reasons. Maybe she had anxiety, maybe she had mobility issues, and they needed his assistance. But that was the plan. He was going to go into the actual MRI room with his mother during the imaging. A little bit of backstory is he was also a pretty big gun enthusiast. He frequently posted firearm videos on TikTok. He did information, safety. He collected firearms quite a bit. So he was known on the social media scene for firearms. The MRI personnel that was working that day, they did screen him. So typically, an MRI screening process would include a verbal interview with the visitor as well as a written form to screen him for things that may be internally implanted, like a pacemaker. The incident report from the facility, as well as statements that were released by law enforcement, did say that MRI personnel did that and even indicated that they did it more than once. And just reminded him again, you can't have any metallic objects on your body when you go into the suite. So, a little bit of a reminder about MRI safety is that magnet is always on. It's a little bit different than other areas of imaging like X-ray or CT, where that exposure is only present with the radiation when that technologist is holding down on an exposure button. MRI doesn't involve radiation, there's a magnet, and that magnet stays on even when there's no patient in the room. So that's where some of those safety issues come into play. So, Mr. Novaeus did not disclose that he had a handgun tucked inside his waistband. The reasons for him not disclosing it are not clear at this time, but he did not remove it before walking into the MRI suite. And again, that magnet is always on. The force of the magnet pulled that handgun out of his waistband and simultaneously discharged the weapon into the victim's abdomen. So it fired a bullet. The victim's mother was unharmed, but unfortunately, his injuries were fatal and he ended up passing away from them later. So, again, this is a really tragic event. We have seen other close calls in other countries. There was even one in the United States, I think out west, where that have involved firearms. And it is known that if a firearm is introduced into the suite, that it can fire that bullet just based on the pull of the magnet. So no one touches the trigger, but it can fire or discharge the weapon. The interesting thing about this is it's probably because of the placement of the handgun in his waistband that it first pulled the handgun out and basically aimed it at his abdomen. So, again, a really tragic event that we would hope Never happens in any country ever again. Hopefully, people can learn from this instance, but talk about or think about why this could happen. Some lessons for all of us, even if we aren't in imaging services, we don't work around an MRI unit, is that patients and their visitors may not disclose all information. This does apply to every person, every discipline, every department. If you interact with a patient or a visitor, they may not be telling you the whole truth. Now, the reasons for that are multifaceted. Sometimes they don't want to tell you the truth. Sometimes they might be confused. They may not hear you. They may not understand. You try to explain a safety issue, like in the MRI instance, where, maybe these technologists in Brazil talk to him for a few minutes about safety, but here they have this wealth of knowledge that is years go in the making, and he's only been in this environment for a few minutes. So it can also be comprehension. We all have to keep that in mind. Patients don't always tell us everything, their families don't always tell us everything. And when we explain things to them, a nice touch could be also to have them repeat it back or to somehow gauge their understanding, asking them a question to make sure that they comprehend. More than verbal screenings are also needed, though. We, of course, screen with the worksheets for both patients and visitors. That is, making sure that they don't have any implants or external metal objects that could become a missile in that MRI unit. It's important to use all of your resources. So, the answer to MRI safety isn't just one thing. It isn't just a conversation with your patient, but that is a part of it. It isn't just the screening form, but that is a part of it. Something else that we use here at Union Health is a screening wand. So this screening wand is used in addition to all of the other safety checks that we have here. We have it both at Union Health and Thomas Plaza, and it works really similarly to what you would see used at an airport or at a courthouse. And this is just to detect any potential metallic objects, external or even internal, on our patients that could prove to be an MRI safety risk. It's a great tool and it should be used with all of our patients. One of the great things about using something like an MRI screening wand is it stops any potential missiles before they go into the room. This is a little snippet from the education that Philips gave to our facility, and this is just a test done with a wrench. Of course, they had to put a rope on it, but that tells you really how strong that metal force, that magnetic force is if there's any type of metallic object. Anything that is not MRI safe can become a missile. So, really think about this true safety story and how it applies not only to your patients and imaging services, but in your own practice. Taking safety checks seriously, really using your investigative skills when it comes to interviewing patients and even instructing their family members, knowing you may not get the whole truth. Always using a visual check as well. I'll never forget at one point, I was back in MRI, and this is years past, but they were interviewing and checking a patient who came down as an inpatient, and the patient had blankets on, like all inpatients. And the orderly pulled back that blanket, and the patient had already completed the interview. No, I don't have any metallic objects on me. And there were underneath that blanket some forks. Now, again, we have to keep in mind that our patients sometimes have had medication, they've had procedures, they're a little foggy sometimes, and they may not have even known that they did that. It may have just been something that happened, they didn't realize it happened. So it's not that that patient was lying, they gave their perception of the truth, but their perception of the truth was not accurate for safety. So again, doing things like pulling back blankets, doing a visual check of that patient, we change our patients into MRI approved gowns and MRI for even for outpatients. So just those extra steps all add up. The answer isn't just one of them. The answer is all of those together. So again, I hope you enjoyed this true safety story and really think about how it impacts you in your own area. And hopefully, you learned a little bit about MRI safety.